This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 2nd, 6 p.m. Here's the latest on Tropical Depression number 4. The forecast from the National Hurricane Center has this northeast of the Leeward Islands going Wednesday night into Thursday as a strong tropical storm. And then the system continues off to the northwest, slows down its forward speed significantly here, and heading in the general direction of between Bermuda and the east coast of the United States. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the future forecast of this, and this track may shift either right or left. There's a lot of discrepancy in the models, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But that's the current forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. Now, if we open up the HurrTrack program, what you're looking at on the screen is the only system that we can find on the HurrTrack program on this date in this location out in the Atlantic. This was from 1899. A hurricane became a Category 4 hurricane, unnamed, here in the northern Leeward Islands, plastered Puerto Rico, moved through the Bahama Islands, did a real crazy track here, squiggled all over, hit the Outer Banks of North Carolina, then went out to sea and went across the Atlantic. Of course, the data was a little sketchy back then, so this might not be the exact track it took, but we know where it made landfall for certain. And this was right around this date, and this is the track it took. August storms are notorious for changing direction and doing a lot of crazy stuff, so we need to watch this one very, very closely. Now let's take a look at the models on this system, and the mentioned in the National Hurricane Center discussion of the TVCN model. Now there it is. The TVCN model has this tracking pretty much west-northwest, then northwest between Bermuda and the United States coastline. Now that is to the left of the GFDL and the European model, which take a weaker system a little bit closer to Bermuda over here and recurve it out to sea. National Hurricane Center is not quite biting on that just yet. And the reason is because we have another surprise in the models, and that is the Canadian model. Look at this track. It has really shifted to the south over the Greater Antilles through the Bahamas towards Florida. Now, yesterday and the day before, the European model was showing a track similar to this through the Bahamas and into the Gulf of Mexico, and that shifted wildly to the right. So the models are flip-flopping all over the place here, and this is why we need to keep a very close eye on the future of this, and the people listening in the Leeward Islands need to pay very close attention to this. This could easily ramp up to a hurricane before it gets in that vicinity, even though the forecast does not call for that. So everybody needs to pay close attention to what's happening here. All right, here are the model projections from TropicAtlantic.com. Chris was on the broadcast last night, Weather in the Media Show, talking about how he does all this, puts these models up graphically. And you can listen to that if you're an archive subscriber. It's about an hour and a half long. And Chris goes over all the new products he's producing and how he gets them online. But here is the latest model forecast, the early cycle models. And none of them are taking this to hurricane strength at the moment. The closest that takes it to that is the D-Ships model. These are intensity models, by the way. And this takes it up to around 70 knots, 70 miles an hour, rather, 60 knots. And then pretty much stabilizes it after about 72 hours, as it's going to run into a little bit of wind shear north of Puerto Rico. Now, the late cycle models are the aviation ensemble models for the most part, along with the H-Wharf, and the GFDL is sprinkled in here too. But notice on this graph, they're pretty much keeping this, maybe, if anything, maybe a steady, slow intensification later in the period. So maybe the early cycle, the late cycle models, rather, are onto something here, and maybe they're not going to weaken the system as much as what was earlier thought when it's north of the Greater Antilles. We'll just have to wait and see what happens with these models. All right, back in 1955, here's the track of Connie. This was out in the East Atlantic, scooted off to the west, became a major hurricane here, and then kind of found a weakness in the ridge, kind of like what they're forecasting with this. And then it bent back to the west temporarily, then it went to the north and hit the Outer Banks as a Category 1/Category 2 type hurricane. And then a few days later, another system developed out here in the Mid-Atlantic. This one found a weakness pretty quick, and then the ridge built back in and shot it off to the west. So you notice these both have a trend. They both strengthened, and then they both weakened as they headed toward the U.S., but they were also changing tracks as well. So, again, as I showed you that 1899 track, there's a lot of erratic systems around this time of the year in August. So we need to pay close attention to this system, as I said earlier. Now, here's the steering flow, the current steering flow for Tropical Depression number 4, and this is way up in the upper levels of the atmosphere, around 35,000 feet. And you can see our steering flow is pretty much very fast here, 20 knots or so. Now, sometimes these systems can outrun their circulation. The cloud tops get blown off to the west, and the circulation, actually the cloud tops get left behind, and the center of circulation outraces the convection. Sometimes you have a little circulation out here, and all the convection's back here, and then it basically weakens into an open wave. That is a possibility, and the National Hurricane Center mentioned that in the outlook at 5 p.m. But very strong steering flow. But what happens up here north of Puerto Rico, the steering breaks down up here, and because we have the Azores high and we have another high over the southeastern U.S., it's finding that weakness up in there. But will that weakness be there when it gets over toward the Bahamas? Well, here are the pressures from sailweather.info, and you can see we have very high pressure out here, 1018, 1018 up in here, 1020 millibars. So there's obviously a strong high pressure established out here right now. The question is this going to break down as this system gets up in this area here? We'll have to wait and see on that. But right now, the Azores high is holding pretty strong out here. Here's the upper level winds from the University of Wisconsin. 30 knots up here. This was around 40 yesterday, so it might be weakening just a tad. Here's that broad area of low pressure, that upper low. It's about 10,000 feet up in the atmosphere. That's causing, expected to cause some wind shear and dry air conditions out in front of our new tropical depression, which has a little bit of a high pressure building over the top of it, and that might allow this to shield itself and get a little bit stronger as it heads in the general direction of the Leeward Islands. So again, this could be something significant here before it has any chance to get weakened by upper level winds. Look at this big old high out here, and that's going to move off the coast, and that's going to be the determining factor of whether this is going to linger, or is it going to move off to the east, or is this high going to build in and shove this further to the west? These are all unanswered questions at this time. Elsewhere out in the East Atlantic, we have another wave out here that there's no invest on this yet, but there could be in the next 24 to 36 hours. And the GFS, interestingly, develops this behind what will be Colin, and this could become Tropical Storm Danielle and follow in the heels of Colin and head up in the North Atlantic. That's the early model runs anyway on this. So we have two systems to watch out there. As I mentioned, Chris was on the show last night on the Weather and the Media show. That archive is available at Hurricane City. Check out tropicalatlantic.com. He has all the latest details on the models on Tropical Depression number 4. But check out that archive if you can. All right, let's take a look at the water vapor loop of the Atlantic. And again, you can see our upper level low circling right here. Here's our system out here, Tropical Depression number 4. Dry air out in front of it, dry air in front, and that's why the models are not really showing much in the form of strengthening with this system. But we'll have to wait and see. And again, tomorrow's update will have a lot more information and data due to the fact that we now have an organized system, and we'll have a 24-hour model cycle to get some really good handle on this. But here's the question: is this weakness going to be up here or not? We'll have to wait and see, and later in the week we'll have a much better handle on this. Well, that's it for now. We'll be back with another update tomorrow evening. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.